The breaking moment came when he didn't react the way I expected. I wanted him to look hurt, maybe jealous, maybe even angry, something that would make me feel powerful. Instead, he smiled once, not warmly, but like he'd just solved a question he'd been carrying for months. He pulled out his phone, opened our shared group chat with friends, and typed one message: "I'm heading out, don't wait." Then he placed his keys on the table in front of everyone, like a public goodbye, and walked away while I was still laughing. The laughter died in my throat because I realized the crowd wasn't laughing with me anymore. They were watching me lose him in real time, and for the first time, I didn't look confident, I looked replaceable. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here, sitting in our living room with 8 of our closest friends, watching my husband Malcolm walk out on me after I made what I thought was a harmless joke about Lucas from my office. My name is Odessa Varel, and I work in marketing administration for a mid-sized tech company downtown. Nothing glamorous, just coordinating campaigns and managing social media accounts for clients who think they know better than we do. Malcolm works in accounting for a law firm, steady and reliable like everything else about him. We've been married for 9 years, together for 12, and we have a 7-year-old daughter named Miri who thinks her daddy hung the moon. The dinner party was my idea. I'd been feeling restless lately, like our social circle had gotten too comfortable, too predictable. Everyone always treated Malcolm and me like this stable, boring couple who never did anything exciting. I wanted to shake things up, show everyone that I wasn't just some suburban wife who'd lost her edge. "You should have seen Lucas today," I said, twirling my wine glass as I addressed our friends scattered around our open-plan living room. He brought me coffee again, and when I thanked him, he said, "Anything for you, beautiful." My mother, Ruth, who'd driven down from her house across town, laughed immediately. "Oh, honey, you still got it. Some women our age would kill for that kind of attention." "Mom, I'm 32, not 50, I said, but I was smiling. This was exactly the reaction I wanted. Vanessa, my closest friend from college, was recording everything on her phone for Instagram stories. "Odessa's got game," she announced to her camera. "Modern women don't get jealous anymore, right, Malcolm?" Malcolm was sitting in his usual spot on the corner of our sectional sofa, cutting his chicken methodically. He looked up when Vanessa said his name, but didn't say anything, just gave that small smile and went back to his plate. "See?" I said, gesturing toward him. "He knows he's not the only one. I could replace him any time, and he could replace me. That's what makes us work. No jealousy, no insecurity, just 2 adults who choose to be together." The room went quiet for a beat. My sister-in-law Diane, Malcolm's older sister, set down her fork with a little too much force. "That's an interesting way to look at marriage," she said carefully. "It's realistic," I continued, feeling emboldened by my mother's approving nods. "I mean, come on. We all flirt at work. We all have little crushes. The difference is being honest about it instead of pretending we're above human nature." "Tell us more about this, Lucas," said Brian, Vanessa's husband. He was leaning forward with that eager expression men get when they smell drama brewing. He's 29, works in our creative department, tall, dark hair, always smells like expensive cologne. I was really warming up now, enjoying being the center of attention. Last week he asked if I wanted to grab lunch, just the 2 of us, said he wanted to pick my brain about a project. "And did you?" asked Jennifer, Brian's wife. "Of course I did. We're both professionals." I took another sip of wine. Though I have to admit, when he walked me back to the office afterward, he put his hand on the small of my back. Very lingering. My father Jerome shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He never liked conflict or tension, always tried to change the subject when things got heated. "How's little Miri doing in school?" he asked weakly. But I wasn't ready to let go of the spotlight. "The point is," I said, looking directly at Malcolm, "we trust each other enough to be honest about these things. Right, honey?" Malcolm finished chewing, swallowed, and set down his fork. He looked at me for a long moment, and I felt a little thrill of anticipation. Was he finally going to show some emotion? Some sign that he cared enough to be bothered? Instead, he pulled out his phone with deliberate calm. His fingers moved across the screen, and I heard the notification sounds from everyone else's phones as his message hit our group chat. "I'm heading out. Don't wait." He stood up, reached into his pocket, and placed his keys on the coffee table with a soft clink that somehow sounded louder than anything else in the room. Then he walked to the front door, grabbed his jacket from the hook, and left without saying another word. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. I was still holding my wine glass, still had that confident smile frozen on my face, but suddenly I felt exposed, vulnerable, like I was standing naked in front of a room full of strangers. "Well," Vanessa said finally, lowering her phone. "That was dramatic." "He'll be back," I said quickly. "He's probably just going to drive around the block to cool off. You know how men are about their egos." But even as I said it, I could see the way everyone was looking at me. Not with admiration or amusement anymore. Diane looked disgusted. My father looked embarrassed. Even my mother seemed uncertain for the first time all evening. "Maybe we should go," Jennifer said, already reaching for her purse. "No, wait," I protested. "The night's still young. We haven't even had dessert yet." But they were all standing up, making excuses, checking their phones. Within 10 minutes, our living room was empty except for the dirty dishes and the echo of my laughter that had died too late. I sat alone on the couch, staring at Malcolm's keys on the table. And for the first time all evening, I wondered if maybe I'd misread the room. Maybe I'd misread everything. The next morning, Malcolm still wasn't home. His side of the bed was undisturbed, and when I checked the garage, his car was gone. I told myself he'd probably stayed at Diane's house, that he just needed space to get over his bruised ego. Men were like that sometimes, dramatic when their pride got hurt. I got Miri ready for school, keeping my voice cheerful and normal. She asked where Daddy was, and I told her he'd had to leave early for work. She accepted this easily, the way 7-year-olds do, and chatted about her upcoming art project while I braided her hair. At work, I felt energized rather than worried. The story of last night's dinner party would make great office gossip, and I was looking forward to telling Lucas about Malcolm's dramatic exit. It would show him that I wasn't some uptight married woman who couldn't handle a little flirtation. I found Lucas at the coffee station in our break room, scrolling through his phone. "You'll never believe what happened last night," I started, but he looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Actually, I saw Vanessa's Instagram story," he said. "Looks like quite a party." My stomach dropped a little. I'd forgotten about Vanessa recording everything. "Oh, that. She always documents everything. What did you think?" Lucas poured his coffee slowly, not meeting my eyes. "I think maybe you shouldn't have mentioned me by name, Odessa. People might get the wrong idea." "What wrong idea? I was just being honest about workplace dynamics, about how adults can be friends without it meaning anything inappropriate." "Right, but..." He glanced around the break room, then lowered his voice. "Look, you're married. I'm not looking to get in the middle of anything. Maybe we should keep things more professional from now on." The rejection stung more than I wanted to admit. "Of course," I said stiffly. "I wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable." But as I walked back to my desk, I could feel eyes on me. Conversations that stopped when I passed. The administrative assistant, Kelly, gave me a sympathetic smile that somehow felt worse than outright judgment. By lunchtime, I was furious. Not at myself, but at everyone else. At Malcolm for making such a scene. At Lucas for being a coward. At my coworkers for acting like I'd done something scandalous when all I'd done was tell the truth about modern relationships. I called Vanessa during my lunch break. "Hey, can you take down those Instagram stories from last night? I think people are misinterpreting them." "Oh, honey," Vanessa said, and I could hear the pity in her voice. "I already deleted them this morning, but you know how the internet works. People screenshot things." "What do you mean?" I mean, Sarah Chen from your office DM'd me asking about the video. And Brian's been texting me all morning asking if you and Malcolm are okay. I think the story's getting around. My hands were shaking as I hung up. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to look confident and modern and enviable. Instead, I was becoming office gossip and not the good kind. When I got home that evening, Malcolm's car was in the driveway. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by anger. He was going to apologize, and I was going to make him work for it. But when I walked into the house, something felt different. Malcolm was in the kitchen making dinner for himself and Miri, but he barely acknowledged me. No, how was your day? No kiss on the cheek, just a polite nod, like I was a neighbor he didn't know very well. Daddy, Miri ran to hug me. Daddy made pancakes for dinner. He said sometimes it's fun to eat breakfast food at night. That's nice, baby, I said, watching Malcolm over her head. He was moving around our kitchen like everything was normal, but there was something cold in his demeanor that I'd never seen before. After Miri went to bed, I tried to address the elephant in the room. Look, I'm sorry if I embarrassed you last night. I was just trying to have fun with our friends. Malcolm was loading the dishwasher, his movements precise and controlled. You don't need to apologize for being yourself, Odessa. The words should have been reassuring, but his tone was flat, distant. What's that supposed to mean? It means I finally understand who you are, and who we are as a couple. He closed the dishwasher and turned to face me. I've been thinking about it all day, and you're right. We should both be free to explore other options. Something cold settled in my stomach. Malcolm, I wasn't serious about replacing you. I was just making a point about trust and honesty in relationships. I know exactly what you were doing, he said calmly, and I think it's time we both started being more honest about what we want. He walked past me toward the stairs, and I noticed he was carrying a small overnight bag. Where are you going? I'm staying in the guest room for a while. I think we both need some space to figure things out. That night, I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. I'd wanted to feel powerful, desired, interesting. Instead, I felt like I was losing control of my own narrative. I picked up my phone and scrolled through social media, looking for distraction. But everywhere I looked, I saw happy couples, stable families, people who seemed to have their lives figured out in ways I suddenly wasn't sure I did. Around midnight, I heard Malcolm's phone buzzing in the guest room. Then the sound of him making a quiet phone call. I crept to the door and pressed my ear against it, but I could only make out fragments. Appointment tomorrow. Financial records. Need to document everything. My blood ran cold. Those didn't sound like work calls. Those sounded like the kind of calls people make when they're planning something big, something final. But I pushed the thought away. Malcolm was steady, predictable, conflict-averse. He'd never do anything drastic without talking to me first. This was just his way of processing what happened. By next week, we'd be back to normal. I had no idea how wrong I was. The next few days passed in a strange, tense routine. Malcolm was polite but distant, treating me like a roommate rather than his wife. He helped Miri with her homework, made dinner when it was his turn, kept up his share of household responsibilities. But there was no warmth, no intimacy, no acknowledgement of the 12 years we'd spent building a life together. I threw myself into work, determined to prove that I was thriving. If Malcolm wanted to sulk, that was his choice. I had better things to do than coddle his wounded pride. But Lucas continued to avoid me, and the office atmosphere remained awkward. I caught Kelly whispering to other coworkers, conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked by. During our weekly team meeting, my supervisor Jennifer made pointed comments about maintaining professional boundaries that felt aimed directly at me. By Friday, I was desperate to regain some sense of control. When my mother called to invite Malcolm and me to dinner at her favorite downtown bistro, I saw an opportunity. Actually, Mom, would it be okay if I brought a friend from work? Lucas has been having a hard time lately, and I thought it might cheer him up to meet the family. Of course, honey. The more the merrier. Is Malcolm okay with that? I glanced toward the guest room where Malcolm was helping Miri with a school project. I'm sure he won't mind. He's always saying we should expand our social circle. The lie came easily, and I felt a little thrill of rebellion. If Malcolm wanted to treat me like a stranger, I'd show him exactly what that could look like. Convincing Lucas to come took more effort. He was reluctant at first, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of meeting my family. But I played up the just friends angle, insisted it was a casual group dinner, nothing romantic or inappropriate about it. My family loves meeting new people, I told him. And honestly, after this week, I could use a friendly face at the table. Saturday evening, I spent extra time getting ready. I chose a red dress that hugged my curves, did my makeup more dramatically than usual, wore the perfume that always got compliments. When Malcolm saw me coming down the stairs, something flickered across his face, but he didn't comment. Ready to go? I asked brightly. Lucas is meeting us there. Lucas is coming to dinner. This was the first emotion I'd seen from Malcolm all week, surprise, and something else I couldn't quite identify. I thought it would be nice for Mum and Dad to meet some of my work friends. You're always saying we should be more social. Malcolm studied my face for a long moment. Of course, that sounds interesting. The bistro was crowded and loud, exactly the kind of place where conversations could get lost in the ambient noise. My parents were already seated at a large round table when we arrived, and Diane was with them. She'd brought her teenage son Tyler, who immediately started showing Miri games on his phone. Lucas arrived 10 minutes after us, looking nervous and overdressed in a suit that was clearly expensive. He brought flowers for my mother, which she accepted with delight. Odessa talks about you all the time, Mom gushed as Lucas took the seat next to mine. She says you're so creative and talented. Mom, I said, laughing, but I was pleased. This was going exactly as I'd hoped. Throughout dinner, I made sure to include Lucas in every conversation, touch his arm when I laughed at his jokes, lean in close when he spoke. I could feel Malcolm watching from across the table, but his expression remained neutral. Diane, however, was less subtle. So, Lucas, how long have you been working with Odessa? About 8 months, he said, clearly trying to read the room. And do you often attend family dinners with your coworkers? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. Not usually, no. But Odessa mentioned you were lovely people, and I've been going through a difficult time lately. What kind of difficult time? Diane pressed. I jumped in quickly. Lucas recently broke up with his girlfriend. I thought getting out and meeting new people might help him move forward. How thoughtful of you, Diane said, but her tone suggested she found it anything but thoughtful. As the evening progressed, I grew bolder. When Lucas complimented my dress, I twirled to show it off. When he offered to share his dessert, I accepted a bite from his fork. When he put his hand on my back as I stood to use the restroom, I didn't pull away. I was having such a good time performing this new version of myself that I almost forgot about Malcolm entirely. Until I came back from the restroom and found him standing by our table, putting on his jacket. Where are you going? I asked. Home, he said simply. I have some work to catch up on. You all enjoy the rest of your evening. He kissed Miri's forehead, nodded politely to my parents, and walked out without another word. Well, my father said after an uncomfortable pause, I guess Malcolm really does have a lot of work these days. But I could see the questions in everyone's eyes. Even my mother looked uncertain, and she usually supported everything I did without question. Lucas excused himself shortly after, claiming he had an early morning. The family dinner ended awkwardly, with forced smiles and promises to do this again soon that everyone knew were empty. On the drive home, Miri fell asleep in her car seat, and I was left alone with my thoughts. I told myself the evening had been a success. I'd shown everyone that I was desirable, that other men found me attractive and interesting. If Malcolm chose to be jealous and dramatic about it, that was his problem. But when I pulled into our driveway, I saw Malcolm's car wasn't there. And when I carried a sleeping Miri into the house, I found something that made my blood run cold. On our kitchen counter, next to a stack of mail, were several official-looking documents. The letterhead read, Morrison, Klein and Associates, Family Law. My hands shook as I picked up the top page. Preliminary Financial Disclosure Statement. Below that, Child Custody Evaluation Request. And at the bottom, a yellow sticky note in Malcolm's careful handwriting. We need to talk tomorrow, after Miri goes to her sleepover. I sank into a kitchen chair, staring at the papers. This wasn't about wounded pride or temporary anger. This was about lawyers and custody, and the systematic dismantling of our marriage. And attached to the legal documents, printed out in black and white, were screenshots. Screenshots of text messages between Lucas and me. Screenshots of our lunch receipts. Screenshots of Vanessa's Instagram story from the dinner party. Evidence. Malcolm had been collecting evidence. For the first time since this all started, I realized I might have seriously underestimated my husband, and seriously overestimated my own power to control the situation. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept staring at those legal documents, trying to understand how Malcolm had moved so quickly from hurt husband to strategic opponent. The man I'd been married to for 9 years, the man I thought I knew inside and out, had apparently been 3 steps ahead of me this entire time. Sunday morning, I tried to act normal for Miri's sake. Malcolm came home early to make her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes with whipped cream. He was warm and attentive with her, helping her pack for her sleepover at her best friend Emma's house, but he barely acknowledged my presence. "Daddy, are you and Mommy fighting?" Miri asked as Malcolm braided her hair. "Sometimes grown-ups need to have important conversations," he said carefully, "but that doesn't change how much we both love you." The way he phrased it made my stomach clench, like he was already preparing her for what was coming. After Malcolm dropped Miri off at Emma's, he came home and found me sitting at the kitchen table with the legal documents spread out in front of me. "We need to talk," he said, taking the seat across from me. "Malcolm, I know you're upset about last night, but bringing lawyers into this seems extreme. Can't we work through this ourselves?" He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry, not hurt, but something colder. Disappointed, maybe. Or resolved. "This isn't about last night, Odessa. This is about who you've become. Who you've probably always been, and I was too trusting to see it." "What are you talking about?" He pulled out his phone and scrolled to something. "I hired a private investigator last week. After your dinner party performance, I needed to know if my suspicions were justified." My mouth went dry. "You hired a private investigator?" "Lucas's car was parked outside the Marriott downtown last Tuesday afternoon. The same afternoon you told me you were working late on the Henderson campaign. The investigator has photos of you and Lucas going into the hotel together and coming out 2 hours later." The room seemed to tilt. I'd been so careful, so sure that no one would ever find out about that one afternoon. It had just been a moment of weakness, a response to feeling unappreciated at home and desired by someone new. "Malcolm, I can explain. There's also your credit card statement. Lunch at Romano's Cafe with Lucas 6 times in the past month. The expensive lingerie purchased the day before your first hotel meeting. The Uber receipts to his apartment complex." Each revelation hit like a physical blow. I'd thought I was being clever, discreet. I'd had no idea how easy it was to trace a digital footprint when someone actually bothered to look. It was nothing serious. Just a stupid mistake. A moment of feeling unappreciated and... "Stop." Malcolm's voice was quiet but firm. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was some spontaneous moment of weakness. You've been planning this affair for weeks. You brought him to meet your family. You humiliated me in front of our friends, and then doubled down by parading him in front of your parents. I felt tears starting, but they felt calculated rather than genuine. Malcolm, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. Think about Miri. I am thinking about Miri. That's why I'm documenting everything. That's why I've already spoken to a lawyer about custody arrangements. The finality in his voice terrified me. You can't take my daughter away from me. I'm not taking her away. I'm ensuring she has stability and isn't exposed to her mother's affair partners during custody time. The clinical way he said it made me realize how thoroughly he'd thought this through. While I'd been playing games and seeking validation, he'd been building a legal strategy. Over the next few days, my world began to unravel in ways I hadn't anticipated. Word of Malcolm filing for divorce spread through our social circle with devastating speed. Vanessa, who I'd counted on for support, became increasingly distant. I just think you should have been more careful, she said when I called her crying. I mean, bringing Lucas to family dinner. That was pretty bold, Odessa. I thought you'd understand. You're always posting about women's empowerment and not being controlled by patriarchal expectations. There's a difference between empowerment and this. You have a daughter, Odessa. You have responsibilities. Even my mother, my most reliable ally, seemed shaken when the full scope of the affair came to light. Honey, I supported you when I thought you were just being friendly with a coworker. But an actual affair, with hotel meetings, that's not the daughter I raised. Mum, you were the one encouraging me to enjoy the attention. You said I still had it. I meant harmless flirting, not this, and bringing him to meet us, making your father and me unknowing participants in your deception. I'm disappointed in you, Odessa. The worst part was work. Lucas had apparently requested a transfer to another department, and when I tried to corner him in the break room, he made it clear that whatever we'd had was over. My manager called me into her office yesterday, he said, not meeting my eyes. Someone sent her screenshots of Vanessa's Instagram story. HR is opening an investigation into inappropriate workplace relationships. Lucas, we can handle this together. There is no we, Odessa. There never was. This was a mistake, and now it's affecting my career. Please just leave me alone. The humiliation was overwhelming. I'd gone from feeling powerful and desired to being the office pariah in less than a week. People whispered when I walked by, and I caught Kelly showing other coworkers something on her phone that made them all look at me with a mixture of pity and judgment. But the final blow came when I checked my social media accounts. Someone had created a compilation video of Vanessa's Instagram stories from the dinner party, set to music with mocking captions. When you tell everyone you can replace your husband anytime, appeared over footage of me laughing and flirting with Lucas, followed by, but he replaces you instead, over a photo someone had taken of Malcolm walking out. The video had been shared hundreds of times across different platforms. Comments ranged from supportive, "You dodged a bullet, girl," to brutal, "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes." But the worst were the ones from people I knew. Former friends, co-workers, even distant relatives, expressing their shock and disappointment. I tried to control the narrative, posting my own response about toxic masculinity and double standards, but it only made things worse. The more I tried to justify my actions, the more desperate and delusional I sounded. Malcolm, meanwhile, remained calm and methodical throughout everything. He communicated with me only through his lawyer or brief, polite texts about Miri's schedule. When I tried to engage him in emotional conversations about our marriage, he redirected everything to practical matters: custody arrangements, property division, financial disclosures. It was like watching a masterclass in how to dismantle a life systematically and legally, and I was powerless to stop it. 3 weeks after Malcolm filed for divorce, I was sitting in my own lawyer's office, listening to her explain just how thoroughly my husband had outmaneuvered me. "Mrs. Varell, I have to be honest with you. Your husband's legal team has built an extremely strong case. The evidence of infidelity is overwhelming, and in this state, that significantly impacts both property division and custody arrangements. My lawyer, Patricia Hendricks, was a middle-aged woman with steel-grey hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that usually made me feel confident. Today, she just looked tired. "But I'm Miri's mother," I protested. "Courts favor mothers in custody cases, don't they?" "Not when there's documented evidence of the mother introducing affair partners to the child and extended family. Not when there are concerns about judgment and stability." She spread out copies of the evidence Malcolm's team had provided. Photos of Lucas and me at the hotel, credit card statements, text message transcripts, even a sworn statement from the restaurant server who'd witnessed my behavior at the family dinner. "How did he get all of this so quickly?" "Your husband works for a law firm, Mrs. Varell. He understands how these cases work, and he prepared thoroughly before filing. Meanwhile, you've been—" She paused diplomatically. "You've been making public statements on social media that aren't helping your case." I thought about the posts I'd made over the past few weeks, trying to control the narrative. Posts about emotional abuse and controlling behavior that had backfired when people pointed out that Malcolm had never tried to stop me from doing anything. He'd simply documented my choices. What about my job? Can they really fire me over this? If the HR investigation finds that you violated company policy regarding workplace relationships, yes, especially since your behavior has created a hostile work environment and affected the company's reputation. Everything was falling apart faster than I could process. The life I'd spent 12 years building was being systematically dismantled, and I felt powerless to stop it. That evening, I picked up Miri from school and tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. But she was asking more questions lately, questions I didn't know how to answer. "Why does Daddy sleep in the guest room now?" she asked as I helped her with homework. "Daddy and I are just working through some grown-up problems, baby." "Emma's parents got divorced last year," Miri said matter-of-factly. "Is that what's happening to you and Daddy?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "Would that scare you, sweetheart?" Miri considered this seriously. "Emma says it's not so bad. She gets 2 bedrooms now and 2 Christmases, but she misses having family dinners together." The casual way she discussed it broke my heart. At 7 years old, she was already preparing herself for her family to break apart, and it was entirely my fault. When Malcolm came home that evening, I tried once more to reach him emotionally. I waited until Miri was in bed, then knocked on the guest room door. "Can we please talk? Really talk, not through lawyers?" He opened the door but didn't invite me in. "What do you want to discuss, Odessa?" "I want to discuss saving our marriage. I want to discuss the fact that we have a daughter who needs both her parents. I want to discuss the possibility that maybe I made some terrible mistakes, but that doesn't mean we can't work through this." Malcolm studied my face for a long moment. "Do you love him?" "Who?" "Lucas. Do you love him?" The question was so direct, so simple, that it caught me completely off guard. No, it wasn't about love. It was just, I felt invisible in our marriage, Malcolm. I felt taken for granted, like I was just going through the motions of being a wife and mother, without anyone seeing me as a person. "So you decided to have an affair?" "I decided to feel attractive and desired again. I decided to remember what it felt like to be someone other than just Miri's mom and your wife." "And bringing him to meet your family? Humiliating me in front of our friends? That was about feeling attractive?" I didn't have a good answer for that. The truth was, those choices had been about power, about proving I could do whatever I wanted, and Malcolm would just accept it because he loved me. "I was angry," I admitted. "I was angry that you never seemed jealous or possessive or passionate about me anymore. I wanted to see some emotion from you." "Well, you got it," Malcolm said quietly. "Just not the emotion you were hoping for." He started to close the door, but I put my hand against it. "Malcolm, please, we can go to counseling. We can work on communication. We can—" Odessa, I've spent the past month learning things about you that I never knew. Or maybe I knew them and chose to ignore them. Either way, I can't unknow them now. What things? That you're capable of sustained deception. That you're willing to involve our daughter and your family in your lies. That you prioritize your own validation over our family's stability. That when confronted with consequences, your first instinct is to manipulate rather than take responsibility. Each word felt like a slap. That's not who I am. It's exactly who you are, and it's who you've probably always been. I was just too trusting to see it clearly. This time, when he closed the door, I didn't try to stop him. The next morning brought a new crisis. I arrived at work to find Kelly from HR waiting at my desk with a manila envelope. Odessa, I need you to come with me to conference room B, please. The meeting was brief and devastating. The HR investigation had concluded that I'd violated company policy on multiple fronts, inappropriate workplace relationships, using company time for personal matters, and creating a hostile work environment. We're prepared to offer you a severance package in exchange for your resignation, Kelly said. Given the circumstances, we think this is the most professional way to handle the situation. I wanted to fight it, to argue that they were being unfair, but the evidence was overwhelming. Lucas had provided screenshots of our flirtatious text exchanges. Other coworkers had reported feeling uncomfortable with our obvious affair. Even the client whose campaign I'd supposedly been working on late that Tuesday had confirmed that no such work had been scheduled. I cleaned out my desk in silence, while my former colleagues watched from a distance. The job I'd held for 4 years, the professional identity I'd built, gone in a single morning. When I got home, I found another envelope from Malcolm's lawyer. This one contained a formal custody proposal. Malcolm would have primary custody, with me getting alternating weekends and 1 evening per week. The financial arrangements were equally stark. I would receive minimal spousal support for a limited time, and my share of our assets would be reduced due to the adultery. But the most devastating part was the final page, a list of conditions for my custody time. No overnight guests of the opposite sex. No introduction of romantic partners without court approval. Regular drug and alcohol testing. Mandatory co-parenting counseling. I was being treated like a danger to my own daughter. That night, I called my mother, desperate for support, but even she seemed to be pulling away. Honey, I love you, but I can't keep defending your choices. Malcolm is being very fair under the circumstances. Maybe you should consider accepting his proposal and trying to rebuild your life. Mum, he's trying to take my daughter away from me. No, he's trying to provide stability for Miri while still allowing you to be her mother. There's a difference. After I hung up, I sat in my empty living room. Malcolm had moved most of his belongings to Diane's house and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 6 weeks ago, I'd felt powerful and in control. Now I was unemployed, facing divorce, and about to lose custody of my daughter. And Malcolm, quiet, steady Malcolm, had orchestrated all of it with the precision of a chess master. I was finally beginning to understand that I'd never been playing the same game he was. While I'd been focused on short-term validation and excitement, he'd been thinking 10 moves ahead, and I was about to discover just how thoroughly he'd anticipated my next desperate move. The courthouse lobby was crowded and impersonal, filled with the kind of fluorescent lighting that made everyone look tired and defeated. I sat on a hard bench outside Family Court Room 3, watching Malcolm confer quietly with his lawyer, while Diane stood beside them like a protective guardian. It had been 2 months since that disastrous dinner party, and I barely recognized my life anymore. I was unemployed, living in a cramped apartment across town, and seeing my daughter every other weekend under supervised conditions after a particularly ugly incident where I'd tried to turn her against Malcolm. That had been my biggest mistake in a long series of mistakes. During one of my custody weekends, I'd been so angry and desperate that I'd started telling Miri that Daddy was being mean to Mommy, that he was trying to keep us apart, that maybe she should tell the judge she wanted to live with me instead. Miri had come home confused and upset, and Malcolm's lawyer had immediately filed for emergency supervised visitation. The judge had agreed, noting that I was attempting to manipulate a 7-year-old child for my own gain. Now, even my mother barely spoke to me. My father had stopped taking my calls entirely. Vanessa had unfriended me on social media. Lucas had transferred to a different company and blocked my number. I was completely alone, and it was entirely my own fault. "Mrs. Varel," a bailiff called my name. "The judge is ready for you." I stood on shaky legs, smoothing down the conservative navy dress I'd bought specifically for court appearances. My lawyer, Patricia, had coached me extensively on what to say and how to behave, but I could see in her eyes that she didn't think we had much chance of success. "Remember," she whispered as we walked into the courtroom, "acknowledge your mistakes, show remorse, focus on your love for Miri. Don't try to blame Malcolm for anything." Judge Rebecca Morrison was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen every kind of family drama imaginable. She reviewed the case files with the kind of methodical attention that reminded me painfully of Malcolm. "Mrs. Varel, I've reviewed the evidence presented by both parties, including the recent incident involving attempted parental alienation. Do you have anything you'd like to say before I make my custody determination?" I stood up, my heart pounding. This was my last chance to salvage something from the wreckage of my life. "Your Honor, I know I made terrible mistakes. I betrayed my husband's trust, I made poor choices that affected my daughter, and I handled the divorce process badly. But I love Miri more than anything in the world, and I'm committed to being a better mother. I've started therapy, I'm looking for stable employment, and I've learned from my mistakes." Judge Morrison nodded politely, but her expression didn't change. "Mr. Varel, do you have anything to add?" Malcolm stood up, and for a moment, I allowed myself to hope that he might show mercy, that the man I'd been married to for 9 years might remember the good times and give me another chance. "Your Honor, I want what's best for my daughter. Mrs. Varel is her mother, and I believe she loves Miri. But I also believe that Miri needs stability, consistency, and protection from adult conflicts. The evidence shows a pattern of poor judgment that I'm concerned could continue to affect our daughter's well-being." He was so calm, so reasonable, so completely in control. Even now, facing the complete destruction of our family, he sounded like he was discussing a business transaction. Judge Morrison made her decision quickly. Primary custody to Malcolm, with me getting supervised visitation every other Saturday for 4 hours. No overnight visits until I completed a parenting course and 6 months of therapy. All of this to be reviewed in 1 year. I felt the courtroom spinning around me as the reality sank in. I'd gone from being a full-time mother to seeing my daughter for 4 hours every 2 weeks. And it was entirely because of choices I'd made in pursuit of feeling powerful and desired. As we filed out of the courtroom, I made one last desperate attempt to reach Malcolm. I caught up with him in the lobby while his lawyer was talking to Diane. "Malcolm, please. I know you hate me, and you have every right to, but don't punish Miri because of my mistakes. She needs her mother." He turned to look at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. But it was gone quickly, replaced by that same cold resolve. "I don't hate you, Odessa. I pity you. You had everything, a family who loved you, a stable life, a daughter who adored you, and you threw it all away because you couldn't handle feeling ordinary. I know that now. I know I was wrong about everything. Can't we find a way to—" "You're still doing it," he said quietly. "Even now you're trying to manipulate me, trying to make this about Miri when it's really about you not wanting to face the consequences of your actions." He was right, and we both knew it. Even in my desperation, I was still thinking about how to get what I wanted, rather than what was actually best for our daughter. "The custody arrangement isn't permanent," Malcolm continued. If you really change, if you really become the person you're claiming you want to be, we can revisit it. But that's going to take time and genuine effort, not just words. His lawyer approached with a manila envelope. Mrs. Varel, these are the final divorce papers. Everything is settled according to the judge's ruling. I took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were documents that officially ended my marriage, awarded Malcolm primary custody of Miri, and left me with minimal assets and support. At the bottom of the stack was a cashier's check for my portion of our savings, enough to start over, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle I'd grown accustomed to. There's one more thing, Malcolm said. He pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. I've documented everything that happened over the past few months. Every lie, every manipulation, every poor choice. If you ever try to turn Miri against me, if you violate the custody agreement, if you make any attempt to disrupt her stability, all of this goes to the judge. I stared at the phone, seeing folder after folder of evidence. Screenshots, photos, recorded conversations, witness statements. He'd been building this case from the very beginning, anticipating every move I might make. You planned all of this, I whispered. I protected my daughter, he corrected. Something I should have done sooner. He turned and walked away with Diane and his lawyer, leaving me standing alone in the courthouse lobby with my manila envelope and the complete wreckage of my life. As I watched him go, I finally understood the full scope of what I'd lost. Not just a marriage or custody arrangement, but the respect of everyone who'd ever mattered to me. My daughter would grow up seeing me as the parent who'd chosen selfish desires over family stability. My friends and family would remember me as someone who'd destroyed her own life for momentary validation. I'd wanted to feel powerful, to prove I could replace Malcolm anytime I wanted. Instead, I'd proven that I was the one who was replaceable, and he'd replaced me with stability, consistency, and the kind of careful planning that put our daughter's needs first. The courthouse doors closed behind Malcolm and his family, and I was left standing alone with the consequences of every choice I'd made. There would be no dramatic reconciliation, no moment of forgiveness that restored everything I'd lost. There was only the long, difficult work of becoming someone worthy of the second chance I might never get.